participate in bird counts. Thanks. Sorry. Those of you who participate in bird counts have probably already met tonight's speaker, Yousif Attia. I found out what a great photographer he is at our December in-person meeting. I noticed that he'd taken all the photos accompanying Anne Murray's presentation and mentioned it to David Bradley, who happened to be sitting at the same table. And he said that Yousif was a very accomplished photographer and it would be a good idea to invite him to present. Okay, I'm on that one. As it happened, Yousif was in Uganda, and when invited to present, he said he'd be pleased to present on that topic. In December 2025, he joined a team of tour operators and conservation professionals from around the world on a familiarization tour to sample the delicacies of the Pearl of Africa. The focus of the trip was to get the lay of the land and promote tourism in Uganda, but along the way they stumbled upon over 450 species of birds and checked off dream wildlife encounters that will last a lifetime. Yousif has focused his attention on birds and wildlife around the world for as long as he can remember. He's an experienced birding tour leader and has traveled widely across North and Central America, the Caribbean, North Africa, Australia, and Borneo. In 2019, he was part of the first all-Canadian team to take part in the Champions of the Flyway, a renowned birding competition raising funds for conservation. His primary areas of interest are identifying birds by sound, migratory bird behavior, and conservation biology. He works for Birds Canada and BirdLife International, where he supports delivery of national volunteer monitoring programs, primarily the Christmas bird count and eBird in Canada. He co-edits Birdwatch Canada magazine and develops web content. Locally, he's an avid birder in the Metro Vancouver area who enjoys meeting new birders and sharing his knowledge on bird migration and identification. I'm really looking forward to this presentation tonight. I think it's going to be wonderful. So we'll turn it over to you, Yousif.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to share a bit of a virtual tour of my recent adventure to Uganda back in early December of last year. The focus of this talk is birds, but there are some like undeniable bucket list experiences, mostly surrounding mammals and tracking of two great ape species. But the bird I chose on the cover here has gained a lot of attention lately because it is both a bucket list check mark and a bird. And so the shoebill, I don't know if all of you guys are familiar with this species, but it is an iconic, difficult to find species. And Uganda has sort of come into the picture because of how accessible it is to see the shoebill. And there's a whole industry built around that. So shoebills are unique in that they don't only attract birders, but they attract nature curious people who have more general wildlife interests as well. So we'll talk a lot about the shoebill, but let's get a little more acquainted with Uganda. So zooming out, you can see that Uganda is a medium-sized country in East Central Africa. You can see to the west, there's this dark area, which is the Congo biome, rainforest biome. And you can see that to the east and north are more arid areas, more savanna type biomes. So Uganda falls kind of in the middle of those, and it's a transition zone of those biomes, which results in a great deal of biodiversity. Add to that there's the Rift Valley that cuts through Uganda, and you've got and the fact that it's situated on Lake Victoria, which is the largest freshwater lake in Africa. You've got a varied landscape and a high species complement from all these different biomes. The Albertine Rift Valley, which is right here in southwest Uganda, that continues down into Rwanda and Burundi, is especially high in endemism. And there's a very range restricted species of birds and animals, including the last place to really find mountain gorillas. So the rough itinerary had us starting in Entebbe, which is just south of the bustling city of Kampala. Entebbe is a much more quaint, kind of quiet city, so it's a great place to start. From there, we headed north to Murchison Falls, where it's more of an open landscape, more of that sort of dry woodland and savanna that I just talked about. Then we turned south, visiting Budongo and Kibale National Parks. Both are two large forest tracts, kind of adjacent to Lake Albert. And then we continued south to Queen Elizabeth Park, where again the landscape opened up to a more open savanna. And then back to the forests of Bwindi National Park, where we looked for gorillas. And that, that's obviously a very, it's not called Bwindi Impenetrable Forest for nothing. It's a very heavily forested area. This is a snapshot of our eBird trip report, which you can see sort of the rough route starting here in Entebbe on the north shore of Lake Victoria. We worked our way to the extreme north, the furthest north that we go, which is Murchison Falls. And then you got Budongo, Kibale, Queen Elizabeth, National Park, and then ultimately Bwindi National Park. As you can see here, there's a route that goes back to Kampala, but I actually had to peel off a little bit early. I had to come back to help on the Christmas bird count in Ladner. So I actually left out of the town of Kisoro here and flew to Entebbe and back out. The rest of the party continued sort of driving along back to Entebbe and visiting Lake Mburo, which would be part of this sort of typical itinerary, but I had to peel off a little bit early. So you can see here it's titled a familiarization trip. So familiarization trip stands for, or FAM tour stands for familiarization trip, which is the objective of getting familiar with a destination or getting a feel for it. So our objective was to help promote tourism in the country. So Uganda is already well known for gorilla tracking, and maybe more recently the shoebill, but not so much for birding as a destination. So one of the reasons we were invited was to come and showcase how important tourism is to Uganda and how great the birding really can be there. So we did see a not too shabby 480 species, and that is, we photographed, more than half of them, and that is, not focusing too much on getting all of the birds either. This was like, we did a lot of other things, like attended some events and met with owners of lodges, things like that. So we were birding opportunistically. I think a more focused trip back there could yield 500 plus species. So it's very high bird diversity. This is our collection that comprised tour operators, some conservation professionals, influencers from all over. We had folks from mostly from the US, Spain, Argentina, Colombia, and Canada. I was the only Canadian on the trip. And like I said, we were invited to just get a feel for the itinerary, offer feedback, on what clients from our respective countries would look for on a trip like this. And we also did a lot of social media engagement throughout the trip with the intention of bringing awareness to birding in Uganda. So that's sort of a theme that's going to come up a few times. This fellow here is Herbert Bairanga, influential figure in the birding scene, owner and operator of Bird Uganda Safaris. Herbert started several initiatives to promote birding in Uganda, has done a lot to encourage women in the birding scene and in the guiding industry. And more recently is started some youth programs and opportunities as well. So his goal is to promote birding more specifically and sell Uganda as a place that you can see these bucket list mammal experiences, the big game, and also rack up a pretty sweet bird list. So let's get into the birds. One of the most striking things that you find as soon as you start wandering around, even the sort of urban areas of Uganda, right in Entebbe, is how diverse it was for birds and how prevalent birds were right in the city. So these great-crowned cranes were not necessarily abundant throughout our trip, but they were found in any habitat. These two were hanging out kind of like in a little farm field in a ditch not too far from town. And as you can see, it is the national bird, sort of on topic with our potential national bird. The gray-crowned crane is the national bird of Uganda and featured on their flag, which is kind of cool. I don't see the Canada Jay being featured on our flag anytime soon, but It's a nice thought there. um, these pinkback pelicans were hanging out in a tree just in town actually, because Entebbe is very close to Lake Victoria. That's not too surprising, although you don't usually see white pelicans like this sitting in trees. These fellows over here are marabou storks tending to their nest. Marabou storks are, of course, beautiful birds. This one here is blinking, so I captured him with the nictitating membrane in mid-blink as which is a protective kind of third eyelid that a lot of birds have, most birds have. And so it was interesting to hear from Herbert that um, these marabou storks really became kind of urban birds more recently. They moved in with like to come to dumps, and they're actually quite tame around town, which is pretty intimidating. This stands up well above my belly button when I'm standing. They're quite large birds, and they were pretty tame, but you don't want to get too close. Because I've obviously had quite a zoom lens, so this is not as close as it looks. Other birds that are pretty iconic and unique to Africa are the turacos, like this great blue turaco, and speckled mouse birds. These are bird families found only in Africa, and pretty common throughout, as well as being in urban areas. And then so as well as things like sunbirds. And so one of the things that I noticed the most, or a kind of a recurring observation I had, was this idea of convergent evolution, and all these birds that, most of my experience comes from, Central and South America and the New World, but seeing birds that sort of look the same. So convergent evolution, birds that or creatures that end up having similar traits as others, except have no common ancestry. So they evolve to fill ecological niches and do the same things, but have a completely different background. So sunbirds, are hummingbirds essentially. They go around after nectar at flowers. They can't hover, but they even resemble them, in the iridescence and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of species of sunbird there. Red-cheeked cordon bleu is a type of small finch that I first learned about as a child, seeing them in pet stores. They're a bird that's commonly kept in cages in North America here, but quite common and nice to see them just in the wild all over Uganda. Weavers are very diverse in Uganda. We saw 20 plus species, including some that were offered some nice identification challenges. This was one of the more obvious ones, orange weaver, and it's found quite locally within Entebbe. So weavers are just fun birds. They build these cool kind of elaborate hanging nests, and they're really colonial. So you get a whole bunch of them all together in one place, and they do these displays where they hang upside down and flap around. It'll remind you a lot of like oropendolas if you've traveled in the New World, which was really cool to see. This is pin-tailed whydah. These are obligate brood parasites, which is just like our brown-headed cowbird. They have no interest in raising their own young at all. They'll lay their eggs in the nests of other birds and have them raise them, which allowed for, growing these elaborate kind of ridiculous tail feathers, which you wouldn't want to have if you were flying around, back and forth to a nest, right? So they got to put that energy and effort into looking like this because they don't actually have to raise their own young. I was surprised at the primate diversity. I'm a big primate buff. I love seeing primates, and these mantled gurezas or colobus monkeys were just like in town in Entebbe in the botanical gardens. So very high diversity of primates, and also seeing African gray. I guess they're just gray parrots when you're in Africa, but seeing gray parrots was also something that I'd always wanted to see in the wild, because they're a bird that again, I first became exposed to them through the pet trade, I guess. All right, so looking back at our map, this is Entebbe, and our first order of business was to search for the shoebill, which is actually very close to Entebbe itself. We started here, right in Entebbe. We got into a speedboat. and zipped across to the Mabamba swamp area. And as you can see here, all this kind of different color, darker colored section is all really extensive papyrus swamp habitat. So even on that speedboat, we saw lots of birds, but it was just transit. But we did a bunch of opportunistic birding, like this red-knobbed coot. And then you get to the Mabamba base camp, which was probably historically a fishing village turned tourism base camp. So you get off the speedboat in this channel, and then you board these smaller human-powered boats where we had guides that were pushing us along with sticks. And as you can see, this is very close to where the shoebill ended up being. It got very shallow. And that's part of what makes the shoebill kind of hard to find is they like this really specific shallow water in this extensive swamp. Probably why they're still around, because they were heavily persecuted. Our guides were telling us that there was at some point folks would see the shoebill as a competition to their livelihood, which is fishing, for example. But with this interest in tourism, that has really changed things, and now the guides all want to get involved and do get involved with seeing the shoebill, which is really cool. On our way, we had lots, as you guys know, whenever you're on a boat, you somehow tend to get closer to wildlife. So we had really great viewing opportunities with a lot of species like African swamp hen, another convergent evolution example, the fan-tailed widowbird is essentially the red-winged blackbird down there. They were behaving the same. They sort of sounded the same. It was really weird, but completely unrelated, right? Because our blackbirds are icterids, right? New World specific family birds. And these are actually related to weavers. I always love a good shorebird. So long-tailed lapwing was one of several species of African lapwings, which are plovers, types of plovers that we saw down there. And then you turn a corner and there it is. The shoebill, it was just like a statue standing there. And that really is, their strategy is to stand as still as possible and then to just kind of dive in face first into the shallow water, into the marsh, into vegetation, and go after catfish, eels, young monitor lizards, and young crocodiles even. So this again, they were very calm and didn't seem disturbed at all by our presence, probably because they've gotten so used to seeing the boats almost every day, probably several times a day. And I again caught this one in an out of sync blink, and I noticed that its nictitating membrane was like really extra thick. And it makes sense if you see the way these things hunt. They really do dive head first into like the vegetation, and they're going after some pretty gnarly prey as well, like little crocodiles and things that can really get you. So they've got this robust, huge clog-shaped bill, but also need to protect their eyes when they're hunting. So seeing the shoebill was a huge highlight for all of us, and it was like right off the bat. And it's just a giant draw to Uganda. So we were very, very pleased. The next leg of the journey took us north to Murchison Falls National Park. As you can see, these dots are all our eBird. We were rampant on eBird, and these are hotspots and these are personal locations. So this is the Murchison Falls area. You can see that it's more light colored, so it's more open sort of landscape. It was a really stark transition, actually, as you cross the Nile River, the White Nile, where it's like really open landscape north of the Nile and just really, more wooded to the south. This is Murchison Falls itself as viewed from the top of the falls. This doesn't really do justice to the experience, because it's actually known to be the most powerful waterfall in the world. The volume of water that passes through a very narrow gorge is actually like the most powerful or the highest amount of volume of water in the world. So it was a very loud, aggressive waterfall, and this was, I believe, we were kind of the tail end of their second wet season, so it was not a terribly high level of water either. So we crossed the Nile. We saw lots of things from the river here, but and this is our vehicle of choice, Land Cruisers with open tops. And as soon as we cross the Nile, you start to see these open savanna kind of iconic species like East African elephant, or sorry, African savanna elephant. And it's also the only place where we saw giraffes. So this Nubian subspecies of giraffe is critically endangered. I think they were formerly known as Rothschilds, or it was split from that, and they're actually a very endangered subspecies of giraffe. And the only place that we saw them was in Murchison Falls. Again, primates all over the place. This olive baboon was just meditating. They're pretty intimidating things, but keep to themselves. And then we did our sort of second boat trip, which was a designated birding boat trip. This is our crew. That's Patricia, one of our two guides, along with Herbert. And she was just an excellent birder and super fun guide to be with. The boat trip was super productive, as you imagine. We saw African darter. We got way too close to African skimmers that just didn't even bother with us. And they were flying around, which was really cool to see. Also, bee eaters. This was a nesting colony of red-throated bee eaters along the banks of the Nile where we were cruising. We actually ended up even seeing a monitor lizard digging into one of the lower nests and trying to get in. So there's always like real action happening in Africa, which is so cool to see. We also saw the giant kingfisher, which is actually the largest kingfisher in the world, which was pretty cool. And then when we got close to the waterfalls, we encountered these rock pratincoles. Pratincoles are a really fun family of birds that are actually related to shorebirds. They're in the shorebird family, but have evolved to become almost like terns. They're kind of like a hybrid tern shorebird thing. This species, rock pratincole, is found only in Africa. A lot of the other ones are highly migratory, but this was a pretty sought after one found only in Africa. This is the spot where we had those rock pratincoles, and this is as far as we could get, but we approached the falls from the water side as well. So you get to go up here to view them from the top, and you also do a boat trip. We also did a boat trip to visit, to check it out from the bottom. After the boat trip, we got to wander around the savannah a bit more and encountered our first ground hornbills. Hornbills are, the equivalent of toucans, I guess, in the New World. But this ground hornbill is kind of something else. It's just really huge. Think even bigger than a turkey, really. And they were not shy, just walking around. Hornbills are kind of unique in that they have modified sort of eyelashes. There are not many birds that have eyelashes, and of course they're not truly eyelashes, they're modified scales, but it's only, I believe, hornbills, ostriches, and maybe like one or two other groups of birds that have these eyelashes. We encountered these piapiacs, which are one of the very few corvids or magpie jay species there. They do have crows and ravens, but we didn't see the diversity of magpies and jays that you expect even in Southeast Asia. But these piapiacs were just kind of gregarious, would move around in gangs and hang out all over the big game. The young ones exhibit this pinkish bill, which is something you do see in jays in the New World. Like if you're familiar with the Yucatan jay and those species, where the juveniles will have like a yellow bill and then they'll have a black bill as they're in adulthood. Also really diverse for raptors, and we had just great, I don't know how many different raptor species we saw, but we saw a lot of different raptors, including obviously that iconic African fish eagle. We saw them fishing and flying around all over the place. This handsome gray kestrel was quite common. We saw them on almost every other telephone post, it seemed. And then we saw this Bodwin's snake eagle, which you can see has a full crop, but couldn't even fit the tail of the last meal it had, which was a snake. So that the sort of tail of the snake is actually sticking out of its bill here. One other sort of modified eagle is the battlelure, which is just a beautiful species with a sort of distinctive, almost absent tail. And these were not uncommon in the savanna and sort of habitats of Murchison Falls. We then moved south towards Badongo Forest Reserve and something called the Royal Mile, which has become sort of a famous birding destination. What I want to draw your attention to here is this stark contrast between the remnant forest reserve and the areas that have been cleared for agriculture. So you'll see that a lot, but and thankfully it is preserved, but obviously this forest was far more expensive than this at another time. As soon as we arrived at our accommodation around Badongo, we encountered our first owl, this African wood owl. We didn't do a ton of owling, but wherever we stayed, we'd get to go outside at night and see what was around, and we usually found either nightjars or owls. This is the birding, the Royal Mile itself. It's become quite a famous forest sort of stretch and birding road, similar to like Pipeline Road you may have heard of in Panama. The Royal Mile is like a must go to in Uganda. There are many species found, Congo Basin or Congo biome species that reach their eastern limit here in this area. So this is one of those species, the white-thighed hornbill. Only place we saw them was in Badongo, and the only place reliably where you can see them. Another specialty found there is the chocolate-backed kingfisher. There were several species of terrestrial kingfishers. This beautiful African pygmy kingfisher is a more common one found throughout, but there's also one called the African dwarf kingfisher, which is even smaller than this thing. I would say it's the smallest one. It's the smallest kingfisher in Africa. And I would say it's, if you've ever seen like a toady or something comparable would be like, it's smaller than a sparrow. It's a very tiny little kingfisher. Another bird we encountered were the wattle eyes. And this group of birds I found really interesting because, first of all, they're like objectively good looking birds, but they're actually named after the females. So this is the male on the left, and this is the female with the brown throat. So this is a brown-throated wattle eye, and this whole group of birds are named after the females, which is kind of unique in the bird world. This is another species, the chestnut wattle eye, again, named after the female. And that's because the females are the ones that actually have distinctive field marks. The males sort of look a little more similar to each other. So I thought that was really cool, and we could use more of that in the bird naming world. Badongo and the Royal Mile was amazing for butterflies, and I just featured one here that I thought was really attractive, this African map butterfly. But when the birding got slow in the day and it kind of warmed up later in the morning, we were just like overtaken with the diversity of butterflies. It was just incredible. Moving south to another national park and forest reserve, again, Kibale National Park, you can see here, obviously, it's not as expansive as it probably once was, but Kibale is known for chimpanzees, right? So this is the chimpanzee trekking place. This was our accommodation, right on the edge of the forest. You just basically can just stand on the balcony and listen to chimpanzees calling in the distance, and great birding. This place especially had pretty good food as well. I wouldn't say, Uganda is known for its food, but I was pleasantly impressed with the food here. Our chimpanzee trekking starts off with basically hiking with local guides through main trails, and chimpanzees do move around every day, but luckily they are very vocal. And I have a few videos. I wasn't able to attach them here, and they don't tend to translate well over Zoom, but the sound of chimpanzees as you're walking through their forest is like, it just sends shivers down your spine, and it's very intimidating. But then you find the troop, and they're typically late to wake up. they're hanging out up in their tree nests, and they kind of just start to, roll around and check you out from you're down in the bottom and they're up in the canopy, and they just start to wake up. And I think every troop has a different personality. I've heard of some people encountering really sort of boisterous, rambunctious troops. We had a pretty mellow, relaxed troop, and I got to see this little guy. It was actually kind of tough to get views of them at first because they were pretty high up, but seeing this young one was really a cool experience. And so chimpanzee trekking was one of the bucket list highlights for sure on this trip. Right at the same place where you look for the chimpanzees, you also search for a very sought after species of bird called the green-breasted pitta. There are only two pittas in Africa, and this one is probably the more range restricted and more difficult to find. Because again, fam tour logistics, we didn't get there early enough. We didn't actually see this species. So here's a illustration from the field guide and a photo from Merlin to give you an idea of what it looks like. So I mean, suffice to say, I have some unfinished business in Kibale. But we did see lots of other great birds, including this blue-throated roller, which is another sort of species that reaches its eastern limit in western Uganda. It's more of a Congo and West African species. Another one, this masked apollo. You can see here, I actually snapshotted the range map. You can see there are only a few pockets where it's known in sort of the East African area. In the afternoon, we got to go and do some cultural experiences. This is Patricia again, and she took us to her home village where we actually got to see how coffee was made and got to actually taste the coffee, which was really, really good if you're into coffee. They make amazing coffee. They took us through the whole process, and then Patricia cut up a nice fresh jackfruit and some sugar cane for us here. So we also got to wander around the village and see how banana rum is made as well, which is an important beverage in the Ugandan culture. In the Kibale area, we did a night hike and used thermal cameras to look for. We actually saw some sleeping birds as well as mammals like the straw-colored fruit bat and this eastern pato, which is part of the primate family. They're called lorises or patos, and they're kind of what we call the lesser primates. They're very slow moving, and this guy obviously his defense is to hang out in places where nothing wants to go because as you can see by the tree he's hanging out in, it's very spiky. We also, so after we left Kibale, we drove south and crossed the equator. So you actually get to stop in this tourist trap spot where you stand on the equator. This is our happy group. And then we entered the Queen Elizabeth National Park area. So after birding in a couple, heavily forested areas, we were back again in this open landscape of Queen Elizabeth Park, looking for large game again. So this is what I mean about Uganda being diverse in not just the birds and wildlife, but in the landscapes and scenery, which is really nice and makes for a super entertaining tour. So back in open country, we saw lots of large in-your-face birds again, like this black-bellied bustard. There were guinea fowls, several species of spur fowl, francolins, so upland game type birds, and we're kind of running around. We did another boat trip, which was again super, super productive. And there we got, sort of different perspective and saw again lots more elephants from the safety of our boat, and got really up close and personal. And just got to have these amazing experiences with with the elephants and other big game. Also in the Queen Elizabeth area, we saw gulls for the first time. These are gray-hooded gulls, an African species. And I really appreciate that. We also saw a few other species of gulls. as well as a few species of shorebirds. We were there in early December, which is sort of winter for the northern Palearctic species like this common sandpiper. We saw a couple of species of stilt, lapwings. There was marsh sandpiper. All these sort of Eurasian and European shorebirds that we just lose our minds over when they show up here were kind of all over the place down there. So this common sandpiper is very similar to our spotted sandpiper in winter plumage, but this is actually how they look year round. This guy was just hanging out on the rock, which turned into a hippo. And we had lots of great looks at hippos up close and from the safety of our boat. Nile hippopotamus was common throughout in wet areas. We also saw a Goliath heron. This was our best look at Goliath heron, which is the largest heron in the world. These guys, I don't have a photo to show scale, but we did at some point see a gray heron, which would have, a gray heron is similar to our gray blue heron, which would have maybe come up to the shoulders of this fella. So they're really a robust, large heron species. Other common birds and striking birds were these gonoleks, kind of related to the shrikes, I believe, but just really pretty birds that allowed close approach and were found all over Queen Elizabeth Park. We had seen a number of woodpecker species. Most of them were pretty shy and retiring in the forested areas we'd been to so far. But Nubian woodpecker is a bit more of a in-your-face species. This guy was hanging out at the hotel, just looking at himself in the mirror here in the window. I also found these lesser striped swallows very striking. As you can see, they're collecting mud for nest building. I think I already mentioned it, but Uganda sort of has two wet seasons, and a lot of birds will initiate nesting immediately following a wet season. So the main wet season through May, and then there's another wet season sort of in October and into November. So we noticed a lot of birds were starting to nest and showing breeding behavior while we were there. And how beautiful are these swallows? Of course, we saw Cape buffalo and oxpeckers. This is yellow-billed oxpecker. It looks kind of funny because he's just looking up, so this is kind of a funny angle. And there's two species of oxpecker that you can see there. This was a substantially less alive Cape buffalo. It actually took us a while to figure out whether or not this was alive or not, or if he was just really caked into the mud. But we got a hint when we started looking around and saw that, he was very much dead because the attention of white-backed and Rupel's griffin vultures was caught. These guys were hanging around and started actually coming in to do what they do. Sadly, many of the vulture species, almost all of them actually have declined. Some of them are critically endangered, and primarily due to lead poisoning. People would shoot animals that would get too close to their farms and things like that, and the lead would actually poison the animals that would eat the carcasses. So a lot of the vultures are not doing so well, although we did see decent numbers in Uganda. This is a palm vulture that was in the neighborhood, but not necessarily interested in the carcass at all. These are unique in that they have adapted to a vegetarian lifestyle. Palm nut vultures eat 70% palm fruit. So it's really interesting that they've adapted to not eating carrion, even though their ancestors probably all did. And they're probably opportunistic and will take some dead food and stuff, but it's not their specialty by any means. On one of the days later in the evening, we ended up getting a call from one of the other outfits that they had two leopards. So of course my heart started racing. I'd always wanted to see a leopard in the wild. And we got to the site where there was literally one other vehicle. I don't know if you've seen or have been to safaris in Kenya and Tanzania, where you'd see like there's a leopard in a tree, and then there's like this, train of vehicles waiting to come get their moment. We had this thing all to ourselves, which made it even more of a unique and special experience. I love this photo because it doesn't take much for a leopard's camouflage to start taking effect. Like this is a piddly little bush, but when you kind of squint your eyes and look afar, you can see how it starts to camouflage this animal. So they're very effective and have very effective camouflage. They eventually walked around and gave us great look sighting. And then later that evening, we did a bit of night stuff with spotlights and thermals. And I apologize for how bad it is, but this is a serval cat. This was super exciting. One of the participants on our trip who had been to Africa before, this was probably the most exciting thing for him on the entire trip because they're quite uncommon or can be difficult to see. You can see here, these are his eyes. These are his big ears, and they're a spotted cat, medium-sized cat, almost similar to like our bobcat, but have kind of longer legs, also have a short stubbed tail, but are well known for their ability to jump really high to catch things flying. So we were really chuffed to see this serval cat. We also, you never know what you're going to see at night. We did see several nightjar species on the way back to the lodge, and this harlequin quail was just on the road. Probably not a bird that we would have seen during the daytime because they're very cryptic. So the last sort of leg of the journey was Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. So this is to give you a bit more perspective. This is DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, here to the west of this white line. Rwanda is down here. To provide a bit of perspective, this is the Virunga Mountains. I don't show it entirely here, but the Virunga Mountains at the very bottom of the screen here, and that's where Diane Fossey did her work on mountain gorillas. You can see here, Bwindi and Virunga are, isolated now. They probably did have contiguous forest all throughout here. So just another reminder of like sort of the remnant habitat that's left and how important, tourism and the interest that the rest of the world had in seeing these things to keep these parks around, really. This is our lodging in Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. We had a beautiful spot where you could see, that gorillas in the mist thing is real. We got there, it was really misty. And, there's a lot of topography there. It rains a lot in that area. This Johnston's chameleon was found by some of the local staff who just happened to see it on a branch and brought it over, and we got to hold it. And the next thing we did was actually start our gorilla trek, which starts with a bit of a welcome song and celebration. These are locals who would sing and dance and provide a bit of a show as a precursor to the gorilla tracking. And again, a testament to how the local economy found ways to benefit from the tourism, and it really did, bolster the economy in these areas, and people found ways to engage with tourism in all sorts of different ways. So it really is an important part of their industry there. Bwindi Impenetrable Forest is, quite a lush, beautiful forest, and it is within that Albertine Rift area where I mentioned the very high endemism. So there were some very specific species of birds that we looked for here, and in addition to the gorilla tracking, obviously. And then, so the gorillas are a little bit harder to track. They're not vocal, like you don't hear them screaming from miles away, but they do leave sign. Their dung and the areas they clear as they forage. And there's like a full-time team of trackers out following the troops at any given time, and the family groups. So there's lots of communication, figuring out where they are, and we literally follow the guides, the trackers through the forest where it's so thick that they have to cut with like machetes to get through. And then we eventually did get to the gorillas. And I have to say, the encounter with mountain gorillas was, very special. There's something about gorillas. They have a calmness to their presence. There's obviously a connection that we share as humans, and seeing them so, being in their habitat and seeing them like this was an extremely special encounter. Um, Once we saw the gorillas, we first came upon some females and some young ones like that one I showed you, and we sort of all hunkered down. And I was sort of the furthest person, down the trail with one of the guides. And all of a sudden, I felt literally the ground moving behind me. And the silverback, we're talking a 400-pound animal, had gotten up and walked right behind me, so close that I could feel the ground shake, and we could actually feel the heat radiating off his body as he walked by. So almost closer than I would have wanted to get. I'm super thankful for that experience. But I mean, this is a creature that could, do short work of us if it wanted to. They're very strong animals. They're obviously very used to people now coming, and also are familiar with the routine of the visits, which are very strictly 1 hour. So they have learned to tolerate people around for this, very finite, specific amount of time, and it ended up being just a great experience. This is the silverback. He's obviously had a rough go at it with perhaps another dominant gorilla, but he was super cool and chill through the whole time, and it was just amazing to be in the presence of this animal. As you can see, our group was smiling ear to ear after the gorillas. We all sort of, agreed that it was, excuse me, the most unique of the experiences that we had. Truly a bucket list experience seeing gorillas. And what they've done, excuse me, what they've done in Burundi is really made getting to the gorillas super accessible. One person on our trip here, who I won't name, it wasn't me, actually got carried to see the gorillas. They have these stretchers with modified chairs, and 4 guides will literally carry you in there. So anyone worried about mobility issues or not being able to get to the gorillas, they really have thought of everything. Excuse me. Excuse me. So you should not let your concerns about mobility get in the way of visiting mountain gorillas or going to Uganda, because you can literally get there um, uh, by being carried, apparently. Um, after the gorilla experience, we got to do a bit more focused birding around the Albertine in the Bwindi National Park and Albertine Rift area. And we actually were visited by the youth group. There was a festival, which I unfortunately had to miss again because I left early, but there was the start of a youth birding festival. So Uganda is actively working with young people, under Herbert's guidance and a bunch of other organizations to promote birding more broadly in Uganda, get women into birding, and also kind of like display or convey that, birding industry and tour guiding is a viable sort of career path for a lot of young people, which was really cool to see. And it was just such a beautiful place. I could spend a lot more time there for sure. And you do need to spend a bit more time there to see all of the really special birds. So I tried to keep this as quick as I could, even though there were lots of photos. Thank you for listening. And my take home message is that Uganda is an incredible place. And however you end up visiting, you should definitely think about doing it. These bucket list experiences are something I'll remember forever. And the birding was phenomenal. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Yousif. That's quite amazing. They have an incredible number of parks and protected areas, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it was impressive that there were, the size of the parks. It was a bit sad to see that obviously there's some destruction around them, but they do have some really great parks and have maintained them for a long time. And it's further maintained by tourism, right? The tourism industry.
Yeah, so is poaching a huge problem there or not?
There is some serious protection around
Yeah.
that park. Probably less so on the Democratic Republic, DRC, Democratic Congo Republic, um, where there may be it may be more difficult to manage, but there were armed guards, with us. There were armed guards all over the place.
Mhm.
Poaching, I don't think, is an issue around mountain gorillas. They're heavily protected.
I wouldn't think so, no. Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing anything on the chat. Do people have questions for Yusuf?
I do. Yusuf, with the two
Yeah.
rainy season, what is the best time of year to go?
Um, yeah, avoiding the raining seasons is I think pretty important. I know that middle time, our summer, so like June, July can be good. It's also like probably the breeding season there. And the time that we went was great. I have to say, I probably saw less than 10 mosquitoes. And while it is a malaria like a malaria consideration country, I guess. I didn't really encounter many mosquitoes. There was nets in all the places. So having said that, November, December, January is probably a good time to go. Low mosquito numbers for sure, and a bit of a drier time. Also, there's the wintering birds there, which adds like an element of fun. I think I like seeing things like that. So.
You guys were pretty wrapped up when you went into the forest to see the gorillas, right? Did they give you a heads up on all of that? Like it looked like everybody was pretty much covered head to toe, right?
So we were, I mean, we're all pretty seasoned field
Yeah.
folks, so we preemptively did that, and there probably are ticks and things, but it wasn't buggy at all. You'll see that if you ever watch videos or see photos, you'll see that the gorillas are covered in flies. There are these flies all over them that have absolutely no interest in anything other than gorillas. Like they are completely just there for the gorillas and their dung, and they're tied to the gorillas. We were, within feet of them and had nothing land on us or bite us in
Hmm.
terms of flies or mosquitoes. This is pretty surprising, actually. I was
Interesting.
prepared to get like annihilated by bugs, but it did not happen.
Are
I have a
sorry, one last question. Are you guiding now into Uganda, or was that not the purpose of the trip for you, just to go?
Yeah, so so I do have plans to return to guide there. I mean, I'm not really here to promote that myself,
Oh,
but and I'm not sure exactly what that looks like just yet. But the idea was that I would go back after being familiar with the country, and you can build a lot of confidence and know what your clients will need when you go on these familiarization trips. So I definitely wouldn't want to go to Uganda blind. But now having been there, I just can't wait to go back. Actually.
quick
Um,
question. What were the polls in the group photo?
the polls.
The last picture there
Ah,
was,
yes, they provide you. So, okay, so when you go, this is a detail I left out. When you go trekking for gorillas, tracking, they give you a hiking stick and a porter to carry your bag. And I'm talking like $20 US or something for the porter. Like it's all very small amounts of money, like in the big scheme of things. The gorilla tracking itself is expensive because of these permits that are required. So it's not. I'm not saying it's completely cheap, but to get help from people there, it is actually not very expensive. So we each had a porter who carried our bags, and we also had these hiking sticks just to help. The terrain is quite steep, and like I said, the gorillas move around and can be. I mean, you might get lucky and find them quite close. We didn't have to hike very far, um, but they can also be potentially a little bit further. But having said all that, you can just pay four guys to carry you in there, uh, which is what someone did, which was crazy, I thought, but it happened.
Anyone else have comment, questions?
Has anyone been to Uganda, or has anyone been to neighboring African countries?
Claude and I have been to Kenya and Tanzania, And then we've
Okay.
been to some other African countries as well, like
Okay.
Egypt and Morocco,
And John, you're
South
looking.
Africa,
South Africa. Yeah, South Africa as well.
Zimbabwe,
Oh yeah.
Zimbabwe.
Botswana.
That's one.
Can't forget that one.
Dia, who was
Um,
on here, is from South Africa or
okay.
South Africa, actually.
And how did you feel about your safari experience? Did you have did you feel like it was a bit of a zoo in some ways, or was it like, did you have a personalized experience? Did you feel, I've just heard I haven't been to Kenya or Tanzania, but I've heard that many of the big parks have become kind of busy with tourists, and it can be just it can take away from the.
We didn't feel that, but mind you, we didn't know what to expect. The very first one, we had what they called full camping, or full, like all we had to do was get up in the morning and they fed us, and we didn't have to do anything. But the second camp, oh my God, we had to do everything. We had to cook, we had to do the dishes, but it was a low budget
Okay.
trip, but we still enjoyed ourselves a lot.
Yeah. One of the things that I didn't mention, but it comes to mind now is, and something that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, is that especially in the big game parks, you can't just like walk around. There's things that can get you around every corner. So you're basically standing by the vehicle or in the vehicle at all times. That took a bit of getting used to for a free spirit like myself, but it's very important that you don't do that. Like, even you can't even go behind a bush to pee or something like that, because there could be a cave.
I know, right?
That will, yeah.
What I remember the most is we're camping in a tent, and I do mean like a pup tent. And in the middle of the night, I'm asleep, and all of a sudden I heard this, and I was going, did I hear that? Did I not hear that? Did I hear that? And then about half an hour later, Claude got up to go to the bathroom. I go, did you hear that lion? And all he says is, oh, shut up. Guess what?
Yeah.
Just outside our tent, the next morning, the tour guide took us to the back of the tent where I heard the sound, and there was a dead impala.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you definitely did hear one.
Yeah.
The place we stayed at in Queen Elizabeth Park was pretty great. The lodge was immersed in the habitat. So I remember, because Uganda time difference is like exactly like the opposite of us. I had some trouble with sleep a little bit, and I was waking up at odd times at night and stuff like that. So one time I woke up, it was 2 a.m, and I stepped out on the patio, and just like the sound of lions and hyenas just doing their thing at night was just haunting.
True.
But amazing at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yousif, how's the driving in Uganda?
Yeah, so the roads are pretty good. You're going to be in vehicles that are, they're all the operators use these Land Cruisers that are super capable. The nice thing about the time we were there, which was that it was pretty dry, was that we didn't encounter a lot of like muddy situations, which can happen at other times of the year. Another kind of point for going in the winter, like our winter. But generally the roads were pretty good. There was one situation where we had to take an alternate route because of a road being closed, but didn't change our plans by much. It didn't really slow us down or anything like that. But I'd say the roads are pretty good. It's not, they're pretty well maintained. The country is generally pretty, pretty advanced, as I'd say, and open to tourism, safe as well. Especially, I mean, if you're staying with guides and stuff, they always know where to go and where not to go. We never felt unsafe at any point in the country. But yeah, you just have to keep your wits about you. It's still Africa.
Right.
Long, long time since I went to Kenya, but you couldn't go out after dark at all. I mean, in
Mm.
camps, you had to stay in your room. That's it. You don't go out, period. But when I went with my father, my guide was my uncle.
Oh, wow.
My aunt and uncle took us around, and it was just wonderful to be able to do that. And when we drove from Nairobi down to Mombasa, where my uncle had cottages, we stopped the car by the side of the road to have some lunch, and baboons just covered.
I believe that.
It's
Yes.
unbelievable. They were so bold and quite rambunctious.
Yeah. Yeah, baboons kind of creep me out. Not sure why.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
What kind of camera gear are you using?
Camera gear.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
had, yeah, I have a Canon setup with a 6D Mark II mirrorless camera. And the lens is a 200 to 800. Um, so I had a bit of flexibility. And actually, I was kind of learning how to use this camera, to be honest, because I had just gotten it before this trip. Um, but I also, at some point, ended up putting a teleconverter on that, which gave me even more reach, which was probably unnecessary now that I think about it. And after talking to some of the more experienced photographers on the trip, um, but you certainly want something with flexibility. I would say a zoom camera, a 1 to 500, a 200 to 800, something where you can get the entire body of a large mammal, for example. So my previous lens was a fixed 400, and all I could do was probably headshots of a lot of the things, a lot of the large mammals, if they were close. So yeah, I don't know. Is my screen still sharing or
No.
no? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I
I
noticed that.
see. I see your screen.
You do.
Yeah, I see you. This is Debbie Halady.
Hi,
I'm
Debbie.
just using Catherine Milligan's dad's iPad.
Okay.
Your shots were great. I missed the very beginning. How did you fly into Entebbe through what place?
Um,
Through London or?
the way there, I transferred through Ethiopia, through Addis Ababa.
Oh,
Um, Ethiopia Air, yeah. By the way, Ethiopia's airport, or the airport in Addis is a really birdy airport. We got a list of like 30 species from the
wow.
airport. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We only had like an hour layover. I met my friend Yoav there, who was traveling also to Uganda and connected in Addis Ababa. And he had been to that airport a few times. And as soon as I got there, he's like, "Good to see you. Let's go birding." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And sure enough, there was like a couple of windows that you just can get a peek of the city and some of the landscape. And we saw like a bunch of pretty cool birds, like crane hawk, and a couple others that are like that I hadn't seen before, and wouldn't have seen in Uganda. That are just more like Ethiopia is its own sort of thing as well, right? Incredibly diverse and unique complement of species there. But yeah, I went through, long story short, I went through Ethiopia on the way there. The way back, I
Oh,
transferred
okay,
through
great.
Dubai,
Oh,
and then
mhm.
I took a direct flight from Dubai to Seattle, I believe it was actually,
Oh,
Hmm.
which was not my preference. It was there was a change in flight, and I ended up having to get. I was supposed to go through Toronto.
so we went to Africa in 1990 and saw lots of things through a camping expedition as well to Kenya and Tanzania. And our experience was you could not go to the washrooms without having a companion because the hyenas would follow you. The it was and same with the baboons. You could not leave any food on a table or out in the open because they would run in and steal everything very
100%.
quickly. Yeah, just very wild. And the first night, I think we were sleeping on scorpions because they rolled up the tent. There
Ooh,
was a large scorpion burrow under our where we had been sleeping. So it was quite an experience.
Right.
yeah, sounds like
Yeah.
it.
My
Um,
dad
the,
almost stepped on one when we were in Mombasa, my uncle's
A
cottage.
scorpion?
He had sandals on and he
Yeah.
went to step on something. And my uncle looked at him and said, "Oh my God, don't do that, don't do that." Because it was a great big scorpion. But my
Ooh.
uncle also told us because beside his house, he had some of those big concrete blocks, open concrete blocks.
Mhm.
And he said he saw a black mamba coming through
Oh,
there.
geez. Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I'm
And he
actually
said he
kind of
didn't have
jealous.
Snake.
anything with him, so he grabbed a can of Raid
Oh God.
Oh,
and he
raid.
sprayed Raid, but it got it to go away.
I don't know. I
But,
guess it works. Yeah. I wish
but
I
I
saw a
spent my
black mamba. That'd be amazing.
yeah, I spent my whole first night there sitting up with a can of Raid because there were so many creepy crawlers. I mean, there's a spider that I heard running across the floor, and I thought, oh God, I don't want to see this thing because I have a thing about spiders. But
When
they
you're
also,
sleeping, having
I can't
something
imagine.
crawling up your arm.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
and
I actually didn't have, I mean, maybe it was the places we stayed. I didn't have any critters in the rooms. I think most of the places we stayed were a bit more like, I'd say higher end places too. I think that makes a difference, but there wasn't a lot of creepy crawlies or critters in the rooms. Outside there was lots, like lizards, agamas. Yeah, there was things to see everywhere. If you're into iNaturalist, you'll have a heyday just trying to put things on there. We ended up we ended up making a iNaturalist project, and just two of us are on it, but there's like easily 200 species of critters and things. And
I think
mm,
Nikki's booking her trip tomorrow.
yeah, yeah, the butterflies were amazing. I'm recently getting into butterflies, but was really impressed. I've been to Borneo, which was amazing for butterflies. I've seen butterflies elsewhere, but this was like next level butterfly action, especially around Badongo. There for some reason, it was just crazy.
Back to the mountain gorillas for a second. I
Okay.
remember back in the 80s, I was in university and I read a book called Virunga. And when I read that book, I mean, it was so doom and gloom for those animals at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, I felt this urgency because I really wanted to see them. And I felt this urgency to see them. And then at that time things started turning around a little bit. There was some funding and more protections and a lot of changes happening in Rwanda specifically.
Rwanda. Yeah.
And um, so yeah, I still have the urgency, but it's not like it was then. Because I thought, oh, if you'd asked me about 2026, I would have said from that book, there weren't going to be any mountain gorillas left to see.
You're
So
not.
so
Yeah,
you're
you're
lucky
not
to
kidding.
see them, and everybody that's still seeing them is lucky to see them.
You're not kidding. And that was something that like was apparent while we were watching the gorillas. Like I had this sense of like the fragility of these things still.
Yeah.
And I just recently saw like a Netflix documentary that David Attenborough did with like a focused one on gorillas that just came out actually, like I think a month ago or something like that. You guys should check it out. And I didn't finish it, but he even says that David Attenborough has really seen it all, I'm sure. He even says that his experiences with gorillas were like kind of the most memorable or just kind of like touching sort of wildlife experiences. And I have to say, something about the gorillas is different. They're just so like calm and just amazing. You
Well,
notice they're
he had some very close encounters with them, like in his
yeah,
early days, when things were probably not maybe as restricted as they are now. But,
yes, yeah.
like he was interacting with them physically. And,
If you
yeah.
notice, we were wearing masks. That's
yes, I
mostly for
noticed
their
that.
protection.
Mhm.
Not that we would get sick from them, but more just because we're so closely related, right? So
Yeah,
it's just precaution. Same with the chimps. Actually, we were wearing
yeah.
masks when we saw the chimps. Um, One thing I was surprised about at Burundi impenetrable forest with the gorillas was how cold it got. So we
Hmm.
started like the early mornings was like we're talking 5, 6 degrees, like and it kind of makes sense if you see how hairy they are. They're like that for a reason. It can get really cold at night.
Interesting.
There's lots of fun facts that they'll tell you about gorillas I didn't know as well. I'll save that for when you go see them. But, yeah, you should definitely go see them.
Oh, we're going.
Terry should go for the butterflies.
Yeah.
We would. Anybody else have comments or questions?
Doesn't look like it.
That was great, Yousif.
That was
It was
excellent.
wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
all right. So that is a wrap for tonight. Who can tell me when the next meeting is?
June 9.
Yay. Please do not show up at the church on June 2nd. Again, there'll be lots of information